Attempting to establish the time series pattern that exists in this set of data. Again, what we're always trying to predict is sales, and in this case our sales are in thousands of units. Now, unlike last example, we have two different periods of time that we can separate our sales amongst. We can separate it year by year, or we have it broken down even further, quarter by quarter in this example. If we want to plot this quarter by quarter, and I attempt to simply input a scatter plot where we have our quarters listed as periods 1, 2, 3, 4 for year 1, 1, 2, 3, 4 for year 2, highlight all the data, insert the scatter plot with the lines, we end up with a scatter plot that doesn't make a lot of sense. The issue that we're having is it's continuously, remember, whatever we put as our first column that we highlight, those are our x variables. So our x variables are almost cyclical here because it's just repeating quarters 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This initial time series plot is really not of much use to us. So I'm just going to delete that one. What we need to do if we have information broken down where we do have it broken down one step further, not just all the sales for year 1, all for year 2, all for year 3, we do have those repeating periods year after year. We will simply need to insert first another column so that we can establish where we have our first sales from quarter 1 as our very first period and our most recent sales, in this case our fourth quarter sales from year 3, as our final period. So you can call this whatever you want. I'm simply going to call it the period, where my very first set of information is the first period, all the way down to my last set of information is the final period, or in this case we have 12 different periods of information. Now that we have that, we do have an increasing set of periods for our x variable or our time series plot, which is what we need. And then our dependent variable of sales, which we'll plot on the y-axis, and our graph should seem to make a lot more sense at this point. So inserting this time series plot, again, a really good idea to get a trend line on there. And what we notice now is we can see that this is definitely far from a horizontal pattern. Remember, we said a horizontal pattern will never be perfectly flat. However, in this case, this is beyond more than just a slight deviation from a flat line. We would begin by saying there appears to be an upward trend pattern in the data. However, because we have information broken down further than just on an annual basis, we have a reason to possibly check, are our quarter 1 sales typically better than quarter 2 or 3 or 4? Or do we have something more where our data is also exhibiting a seasonal pattern? The easiest way to do that is to copy and paste the data that we already have. Simply copy and paste, because what I want to do is to sort this so I have all my quarter 1 information in one spot, all my quarter 2 information in one spot, quarter 3 and quarter 4. After copying our information, what I want to do now is use Excel's sort function and sort by what we're trying to see if there's a pattern within. So here I'm trying to see if there's a pattern within the quarters. Is quarter 1 any better or worse than any other quarter? Is quarter 2 any better or worse than any other quarter? So I will sort by quarter, hit OK, and what we should see is now that all quarter 1 information is together, and if I look at my periods for quarter 1, they should follow in sequential order. My very first period, or quarter 1 from year 1, followed by quarter 1 from year 2, followed by quarter 1 from year 3, and that pattern should exist in all of the other quarters as well. So similarly, for quarter 2, I have year 1, followed by year 2, followed by year 3. And now, to see if there's a seasonal trend, what we're going to do is really the same work that we did in creating our first time series plot. The only issue is we're going to create a separate line on our time series plot for each of the different quarters. So I'll begin by simply starting with my quarter 1 information. So creating a second time series plot. And now that I have that started, I can simply go and click on Select Data and add further information. Okay, I can edit this if I want. My first line that I did, I'll just call that Q1, so I know what information applies to which quarter as I go forward. I'm now going to add another set of data. I'm going to add quarter 2. So Q2, highlighting only the X values for quarter 2 now. So periods 2, 6, and 10, followed by my Y values, applying to periods 2, 6, and 10. And we can see in the background, this has added a second line onto my time series plot. And right now it's difficult to see if there is any sort of seasonal pattern because my two lines are overlapping, but we'll finish off by adding the other 2 quarters as well. So on that, now add quarter 3. X values, followed by the Y values for quarter 3. Okay, and finally, quarter 4, the periods, the units sold. And now that we have all 4 quarters plotted, we should be able to determine whether there's any seasonal aspect to these sales as well. Sometimes you might also want to include a legend in case you forget what line signifies what quarter. So now I can tell quarter 1 is blue, quarter 2 is orange, and so on. Here there does not appear to be any sort of seasonal trend. As we can see, all 4 quarters are overlapping. Sometimes the quarters are up, sometimes they're down. All 4 lines generally have that upward trend that we talked about, but there is no seasonality. If there was seasonality, we would see a definite separation from at least one of the quarters would be always higher in sales than others. Potentially all 4 quarters would be drastically separated from each other, but in this case, with all 4 lines sort of crisscrossing all over the place, there appears to be no seasonal trend whatsoever. So the time series pattern in this data is simply the upward trend that we saw in our first graph.